In the heart of Milwaukee, a quiet apartment hid one of the most horrifying stories of modern crime. Behind the door of apartment 213 lived a man who committed unspeakable acts, leaving the world to grapple with the darkness of his actions. This is the story of Jeffrey Dahmer, a name that would forever be etched into the annals of horror, known as the Milwaukee Cannibal. His crimes shocked a nation and left a chilling legacy behind. Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer was born on May 21, 1960, in West Allis, Wisconsin. As a child, he appeared no different from others, but beneath the surface, there were early signs of trouble. He developed an interest in dead animals, often collecting their remains and experimenting with them, a habit that disturbed those around him. By the time he reached adolescence, Dahmer had become increasingly withdrawn and isolated, turning to alcohol as a means to escape his troubled mind. In 1978, after graduating from high school, Dahmer committed his first murder. The victim was Stephen Hicks, a hitchhiker Dahmer had picked up on a lonely road. Luring Hicks to his family home, Dahmer killed him and disposed of the body. This horrific act marked the beginning of a chilling pattern that would continue for over a decade. Yet, for many years, Dahmer managed to evade suspicion, blending into society like a shadow. After the murder of Stephen Hicks, Dahmer entered a period of relative silence. He enrolled in college, joined the US Army, and tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy. But in 1987, Dahmer's inner darkness resurfaced, and the killings began again. That year, Dahmer murdered his second known victim, Stephen Toomey, in a hotel room. Toomey's death was the result of a night of drinking, and Dahmer claimed to have no memory of the murder. What followed, however, was an escalation in violence and cruelty. Over the next few years, Dahmer's crimes became more frequent and more disturbing. He targeted young men, often luring them into his apartment under the guise of companionship, only to subject them to unimaginable horror. By 1990, Dahmer had settled into apartment 213 at the Oxford Apartments in Milwaukee. The small, one-bedroom apartment became the sense of unimaginable terror. Inside, Dahmer committed unspeakable acts, leaving behind a trail of victims whose lives were stolen in the most brutal ways. The method was chillingly calculated. Dahmer would lure men, often vulnerable individuals, with promises of money, alcohol, or photography. Once inside his apartment, he drugged them, rendering them unconscious before carrying out his horrific crimes. As the number of victims grew, so did the depravity of Dahmer's actions. His apartment became a literal house of horror, filled with gruesome trophies, remnants of his victims that he kept as reminders of his acts. Despite the horrors within, neighbors remained largely unaware. The occasional foul odor or strange noise was dismissed, and Dahmer, polite and unassuming, went about his life unnoticed. The summer of 1991 would mark the end of Jeffrey Dahmer's reign of terror. On July 22nd, a man named Tracy Edwards escaped from Dahmer's apartment after a terrifying struggle running through the streets of Milwaukee. Edwards flagged down police officers and led them back to apartment 213. What they found inside was beyond anything they could have imagined. As officers entered the apartment, they were overwhelmed by the stench of decay. In the kitchen, they discovered human remains stored in the refrigerator, along with photographs documenting the gruesome acts Dahmer had committed. The full extent of his crimes slowly came to light, revealing a pattern of murder that spanned years and claimed the lives of at least 17 men. Jeffrey Dahmer was arrested and charged with multiple counts of murder during his trials in 1992. The world learned the shocking details of his crimes. Dahmer pledged guilty but insane, confessing to the murders and detailing the depths of his depravity. His calm demeanor in court was unnerving, as he openly discussed the horror he had inflicted upon his victims. He showed little emotion, though he occasionally expressed regret for his actions. The trial drew massive media attention, and Dahmer's face became synonymous with evil. The courtroom was filled with the families of his victims, who listened in horror as the gruesome details of their loved ones' final moments were laid bare. Despite his insanity plea, the jury found him sane and responsible for his crimes. Jeffrey Dahmer was sentenced to 15 consecutive life terms in prison, a punishment that ensured he would never walk free again. Yet for many, no sentence could ever undo the damage he had caused. Dahmer spent the final years of his life in prison, where he was kept in isolation for his own safety. His infamy made him a target among other inmates. While in prison, Dahmer reportedly found religion, expressing remorse for his actions. However, for the families of his victims, forgiveness was elusive. On November 28, 1994, Dahmer's life came to a violent end. He was attacked by a fellow inmate, Christopher Scarver, while performing work duties in the prison. Scarver beat Dahmer to death with a metal bar, bringing a brutal end to the life of a man whose name had become synonymous with horror. The legacy of Jeffrey Dahmer is one of darkness. His crimes shocked the world, not just because of his brutality, but because of the calculated nature of his evil. The horror that unfolded behind the doors of apartment 213 in Milwaukee will never be forgotten, and the victims he preyed upon will forever be remembered. In the end, Jeffrey Dahmer's story serves as a haunting reminder of the capacity for evil that can lie within the human soul. The terror he inflicted upon his victims and the families left to bear the weight of his actions leaves a chilling echo that will endure for generations to come. The Milwaukee Cannibal may be gone, but his name and the horror it conjures will never be erased.